Okay, so in this video, we're gonna set up some keybinds using enhanced input system in 5.4. So this is the end result. You can see we got our categories, so keyboard movement and gamepad movement, and we put our respective input actions in there. Okay, so let's get to it. Oh, let's just show it off. So obviously, if I want to jump, it's usually spacebar, but I can switch it, make it B, close this up. I use B to jump, and when you open and back again, still at B. Even when you close the game, it's still at B, right? So it actually saves even in the editor. So it's a full working system. And yep. So let's get to it. So first things first, you have to change some settings that are not on by default. So you go to project settings, enhanced input, and under user settings, you have to enable user settings experimental. So you enable this and then just leave the defaults on. So this is what allows us to save everything, okay? Okay, so then you go to your input actions. I like to, so in my input action jump, for example, go to user settings at the bottom, player mappable key settings. You select player mappable key settings, experimental. That's what we just enabled. And then you name it. So each keybind requires a new key. So if it's for a keyboard, I call it KBM. And if it's for gamepad, I call it gamepad. But this is the input action. So all the input actions, I just do the keyboard. And when I bind them inside the input mapping context, as you can see, my gamepad, then we override the setting behavior. We put in the player mappable key settings and we name it gamepad over here, right? So my gamepad, you can do everything here, or you can do the base here, like I'm doing, right? But you can just do every, see, as you can see, there's none here because it's taking it inheriting settings from action, right? But yeah, you can do it everything here, or you can do it like I am, put the basic keyboard stuff here, and then only override the other things that you support, right? Okay, so every keybind that you want to rebind needs to have this option. As you can see, my look and my move don't have this option because I don't want to allow rebinding of look and move, right? That's not what I want. Yeah, they're not set up because I don't want people to rewind them, so they just don't show up. Okay. So after that, we're gonna have 3 widgets. Okay. So the first one we gonna make is the actual keybind. So this just the glide and the V, right? This whole thing is just one widget. So we can just create a bunch of these and then add them to our list and then populate it instead of creating one by one. It gets, so if you add a new action, it gets added automatically. You don't have to go to this widget and add a new entry. It just gets added automatically. Okay. Okay. So this is just a basic implementation. Like I made a size box. I overrode the width and the height. So 850. Then in the size box, I put a horizontal box. So horizontal means they stack from left to right. And then I added a text box. I aligned it to the left with a padding of 25 on the left. So it stays a little not stuck to the left. And then the important part is input key selector. This is how we do the input keys. Okay. And then this one also has a padding on the right. And that's about it. That's all there is to this one. And we go here. Okay. So we need to create one variable, which is a key mapping row, right? And we're gonna instance editable and expose it on spawn. So we're gonna pass in this keybind when we create this widget so we can populate it, right? Okay. And then on construct, we get a key mapping, we break it, we convert because it's a map, it's a set, right? So you convert it to an array, then you get the first option, and then we do a select because maybe you forgot to name the keybind in your right here, display name. You forgot to name it, so we want when we play to know that we forgot to name it. So we're gonna call it empty keybind name. But if we did name it, we just get the display name from the player key mapping. And then we set the text that we added over here. So this text is gonna get added, it's gonna get populated with the name that we set in the player key mapping. Okay. And then from current key, right, we're gonna pull from there, and then we're gonna make an input chord because key mapping takes in an input chord structure, right? But the current key is a key structure. So we need to make an input key structure, input chord, right? And then you just get your input key selector, and then you set your selected key. Okay. So we set up the whole widget right there. So when we create it, it's going to get populated with whatever information we pass through here. After that, we override this function. So you select input key selector. You click on key selected. So it will be a plus sign. You just press plus. And then once again, we get the key mapping. We break it. We convert it to an array. And we get 0. And then we're going to call this event dispatcher. So you create this event dispatcher. I called it onUpdated. And then it takes an input of map player key args. Map player key args. As you can see, this is a map player key arg, so we need to give it a map player key args. Okay. If there's multiple keybinds for this, you wouldn't be using 0, right? Obviously. If there's more than one keybind allowed, you will be using X. And then here for the slot, it will be a different one also. Okay. But we're just using one. If you want to use 2, you can do that later. But this is just a simple, quick tutorial. Okay. And that's it for this one. So we created this call on updated, but we're not going to use it here. We're going to use it when we create this. Okay. Okay. So we created this. Now we go one step forward, one step up, which is another widget. I'm going to call it widget input action categories. So each category of inputs. So as you can see, I have a category keyboard movement. And then I have another category called gamepad movement, right? So all these, we need to put them together. So all the gamepad movements are going to stay together. All the keyboard movements are going to stay together. So that's why we need to create this widget. If you don't want categories, you can just keep it with this one, and then you populate your whole list randomly with these. Right? You don't have to organize them or anything, but we're gonna organize them to keep it looking good. So again, just simple. I'm gonna just add a canvas, then a vertical box, so we can add a text, and another vertical box, which is the content, right? Again, the text needs to be a variable, and the vertical box needs to be a variable. And I'm gonna click on the settings so you can look at them really fast, so you can just copy them. Okay, so auto, all these alignments, and that's about it for that. And on the vertical box, just fill in the alignments. That's it. On the big vertical, in the first vertical box, it's just you control click this one. That's all we're doing here. And then size to content. That's it. Okay, now we go to the graph. On the graph, simple again. So on the construct, we get our vertical box content and we clear it. So the first time, this is not going to do anything. But if we open the widget again, it's going to have stuff in it. So we want to clear it so we can repopulate it, right? So we don't have duplicates. Okay, so we get the vertical box content, we clear it. Then we set the text. So you can see the category. So we create a text called category, and we instance editable and expose and spawn. That allows us to, when we spawn this widget, to passing these values, right? And we also need another widget, another variable, which is input action key mappings, which is the one we just made. So this one, we need an array of these to pass in an array of these into this widget. So we create a variable, we call it whatever you want, and then the type is widget input key mappings, which is the widget we just made, this one right here. And then you convert it into an array. Instance editable, and you expose it on spawn. Okay. So for each widget that we pass in, we create. So we're gonna pass them already created. So this is already a widget, right? So we're just gonna add them to our vertical box. And then we're gonna bind the unupdated delegate or event dispatcher. We're gonna bind it to this function right here, right? So you pull from here, you do bind event, and this one's gonna bind event up to unupdated, and this one's it's not gonna pop up for me because it's already there, right? Well, it's actually right here, bind event to unupdated. And then you pull from here, you do create, which this will give you that, and you click on create matching event, and it will create an event. You name it. I named it unupdated event. And the only thing you do here is you get your map player key args. So first things first, you do enhance input action. So get enhanced input, get enhanced input local player SAS system, right? So there's two of them. So this one requires a player controller, and this one doesn't. So enhance input local player. So you want the one that doesn't require it. This one. And then from there, you pull, you get enhanced input user settings. So these are the settings that are getting saved. So enhanced input uses a save file to do it. So this interface gets all the settings. And then you map player key. And then you save the settings. So this is what remaps the key. And this is what saves everything. So that's why it changes when you change it in the editor. This is the reason why. Everything's already getting saved over here. And that's it for this one. Very simple. Not much to it. After that, we go to the main one. The one that does everything pretty much. So this one you would add to your options screen. So you will have a tab like graphics, sounds, keybinds. So you would put it in your keybind tab. This right here, right? But I'm just doing a very simple one. We just put an overlay and a scroll box. Common hierarchical scroll box. Okay, so if the list is too long, it will have a little scroll and you can scroll down through it. There's a bunch of settings. I just clicked on these two so it stays in the middle. But depends how you want to set up your UI. You would obviously change stuff differently, right? Yeah, and then this one is a little longer, okay? Nothing scary though. Okay, so first things first, You do this again, you get the enhanced input local player system, you get the enhanced input settings, then you register input mapping context. But it has to take in a mapping context, right? So you're gonna make one. As you can see, my comment here, add more mapping contexts as they are created. So you can have multiple mapping contexts attached. So maybe your base character, so this is my base character, mapping context, has movement and everything. But if you add a weapon, you need attacks. So those attacks need to get mappings. So you would click on the plus sign here and add a new one. As you can see, I only have one in my project. So, but yeah, that way you add all of them, right? As you add a new one, you have to come here. This is the only thing you have to change when you add more stuff. You just add more mapping contexts. All right. Obviously, our scroll box, we have to clear it again, like we did on the previous one. We clear it. We register the input mapping contest, and then we get all categories. So this is a function I made, which is right here. This is the long one, okay? So my get all categories is we get the input local player system, we get the user settings, we get the current key profiles, and then we get the player mapping rows. And from the player mapping rows, we get all the values. We iterate through all the values through the array. We break it, which will give us the mappings, right? And then we convert it to an array. And for each of these key mapping rows, we break them again. Actually, we don't use that here. Okay. For each of these key mapping rows, we just create a widget for them, right? We create a widget, and then we add it to this temp variable, temp array, which is getting them, right? I created here. It's a temp array of widget input action key mappings. And that's it. It can be just a base common user widget, but I like to specify it. Okay. So it's going to do that for each of these key mappings, right? It's going to add it to the array. And then when it's completed, we're going to create this map. So this map in Blueprint is a little tricky because you cannot have a key and the value being an array, right? So it doesn't allow you to have an array, as you can see. So to have an array here, we actually create a structure, right? So you go right click blueprints, I think, and structure, click that, and I name it input mapping keybindings struct. And the only thing this one takes is a type widget input action key mappings, and then you convert it to an array, and then I just call it widgets. So that's the workaround to pass arrays into maps. Okay. And we would love to select text, but it doesn't allow you. You have to have a name. It has to be a name. And then obviously you use the struct that we just used. So input mapping keybind struct here. So now we have a key, which is a name, and then the name is a categories, right? Each category gonna have its own array of keybinds, and then we have to add them, right? So we created this temp array. We try to find other widgets of the same category that we're just doing, right? And if we found them, this will return with actual stuff. If it doesn't, it will return null. So appending nothing into something just gives you something instead of appending stuff, right? So you don't have to check, right? So you append this into this, and this is very important. It has to be this into this, not this into this. right? Because then we're going to add this. So make sure we're going to add this into this. So make sure it's the right one in. And then you just add it. So you pull from here and then you type in add. Add it, you give it a name, and then you make a new input mapping keyboards because this takes an input mapping keybind struct, right? So you will have to do make, and this will give you an option to pass in an array. And that's it. I'm gonna scroll through it again so you can look at it if you need to. A little long. All right, you can pause so you can copy it. And then we go back here. So we got all the categories. Now we're using the category list. We get the keys. Then we iterate through the keys. Right? We iterate through the keys and we create the input action categories widget. So this one that we created over here. We convert the key, which is the category name, to a text, and we pass that text into the widget that and we can do that because we expose and spawn the category name, and we expose and spawn the input action widgets, right? That's why they show up right here. And then we just add these created widgets to the scroll box. And that's it. So I'm gonna go through it again so you can look. All right, that's it. And that is everything. That is how you set up your keybinds. So you don't have to do anything ever again, unless you add a new mapping context, right? This is the only thing. That's why it's on red. It's the only thing you had to change if you add a new one. And then the end result is this one. I guess I can show you how to debug this, but usually you will have it in your options menu, but I don't have an options menu, so I just put it in my character. So we go to character, then my debugging event. As you can see, when I press equals, we create a user mapping, a user key mapping, which is the last one we made, obviously, because that last one makes all the other ones, right? Then we promote it to any variable. This is just for debugging, right? So I don't even named it. Then we add it to the viewport. Then we set the input mode to game and UI. Make sure it's game and UI, not just UI. I don't know why, but just UI breaks a lot of things. So just do game and UI. If you wanna not move the character, you pause your game, right? And then you show the mouse cursor. Show the mouse cursor. Obviously, you need the player controller. Player controller controls all this stuff. Controls the game, the input mode, and the mouse cursor. And then when you want to exit, when you want to delete it, I made a new keybind, which is hyphen. We just get the variable that we created right here, and then we remove it from parent. And then we set input mode game UI, game only. And we set the mouse cursor to hide. And that's it. So there you go. Now you get this. This will be the final result. As you can see, all the keyboard stuff is here, and then these are the gamepad buttons. And yeah, that's it. Good luck.